about Alex Murdaugh, the boating accident, and the killing of his wife and son. You may have even, like us, watched the story on Netflix.
Well, he was eventually convicted of double homicide and sentenced to life in prison without parole. But did you know that he was also charged with over 100 state financial crimes and 22 federal financial crimes? In fact, it's thought that the murder of his wife and son probably had something to do with these crimes. If you are one of the few who haven't heard this absolute soap opera of a story, here's a recap. Alex Murdaugh was a prominent attorney in Hampton County, South Carolina. He was a fourth generation attorney and, of course, was born into wealth. He married his high school girlfriend, Maggie, and together they had two boys, Buster and Paul, who is also known as Paw Paw. They owned not only a 1,700-acre hunting estate, but also two private islands. People in the community knew the Murdaughs as being untouchable. They were that family.
There was already a feeling that the Murdaughs had done some things that they got away with, and we'll get to that later. But let's start with the night of the boat crash.
On February 24, 2019, Paul Murdaugh and five of his friends met up at Murdaugh Island to take his family's boat to a house party. They were all underage and they were all drinking. They left the island around 7 p.m. and went to the house party. They stayed at the party for a while, leaving around midnight. When they got to the boat, Paul insisted on driving to a bar in Beaufort. At the bar, Connor and Paul went inside and ordered a couple rounds of shots using fake IDs. The boys then rejoined their friends on the boat. Witnesses say at this point, Paul was intoxicated and causing problems and even arguing. He was insisting on driving, but was driving erratically and acting very drunk. Anthony even asked to be left off the boat at some point. Morgan, who was Paul's girlfriend, said he kept leaving the wheel to fight with her and at one point even slapped her and spit on her. About 2:20 a.m., the boat crashed into Archers Creek Bridge. Mallory was ejected from the boat into the dark waters. Connor was able to call 911. When sheriffs arrived on the scene, Anthony told police that Paul was driving, but that he was a Murdaugh, so good luck.
Everyone was taken to the hospital except Anthony. Paul's blood alcohol was taken hours after the crash and it registered 0.24, 3 times the legal limit. Alex Murdaugh was seen in the hospital going room to room, speaking to each of the passengers privately. He was even heard on the phone saying, "She's gone, don't worry."
Mallory's body wouldn't be found until March 3rd, about 5 miles down the river from the crash scene. Mallory was a beautiful young girl with a bright future. It was said she was loved by everyone. Hundreds attended her funeral to pay their respect. Her family eventually filed a wrongful death suit against members of the Murdaugh family. On April 18, 2019, which would have been Mallory's 20th birthday, Paul was finally indicted and charged with 3 felony counts: boating under the influence, causing the death of Mallory Beach, and seriously injuring 2 other passengers. He pled not guilty and went on bond awaiting trial.
Paul would never have his day in court, though, and Mallory's family would not see justice. On June 7, 2021, Alex was confronted by the CFO of the law firm where he was a partner about $2.8 million in missing money. Later that night, 911 received a frantic phone call from Alex Murdaugh. He stated that he had just gotten home from visiting his dying father and found his wife and son both shot to death.
The mother and son were found near the dog kennel near each other. It was later proven that Paul was shot first 2 times with a shotgun, and Maggie was running toward him when she was shot 5 times with an assault rifle. There was much speculation, like someone got revenge for the boat accident or maybe even that Alex had hired a hitman, but it soon came to light that Alex Murdaugh was the main suspect. Although he said he hadn't been at the property, he was in a Snapchat video posted by Paul working there on a tree an hour before the murders. It was noted that he was wearing different clothes than when the police arrived. Those clothes were never found. If that weren't damning enough, minutes before the killing, Paul recorded a Snapchat video at the kennel that included his voice, his mom's voice, and Alex Murdaugh's voice, placing him at the scene of the crime.
Before his trial and before he was even charged with the murders, Alex Murdaugh had another run-in with police. On September 3rd, 2021, Alex was forced to resign from his law firm when they finally proved that he had stolen millions of dollars in client funds.
Then, the next day, he called 911 and said he was traveling and had a flat tire when a man in his truck pulled up and shot him in the head. He was taken to the hospital where it was found that his wound was superficial.
The next day, he publicly announced that he had a 20-year opioid addiction, causing him to do the things that he wasn't proud of, and cost him $50,000 per week.
He announced that he would be checking himself into rehab, and at that point, he also admitted that the whole shooting on the side of the road was really a setup. He said that he had hired his distant cousin, former client, and drug dealer, Curtis Edward Smith, to kill him so that his living son, Buster, could collect a $10 million life insurance policy that he wouldn't be able to get if his father committed suicide. Ironically, the suicide clause on this particular policy had aged out, and his son would have gotten the money either way. Curtis Edward Smith ultimately admitted that he had been hired, but said that instead he drove out there and just told Alex he couldn't do it. He said he struggled with him trying to take the gun away. In the process, the gun went off in the air, and he took the gun and left, disposing of it so that Alex couldn't hurt himself. He claims to have not known that Alex was injured, stating he didn't see any blood. Curtis was arrested and charged with assisted suicide, aggravated assault and battery, and insurance fraud. As of February 2024, he was still out on bond and on house arrest. For Alex, on the other hand, this was just the beginning of his financial crime exposure. For this crime alone, he was charged with conspiracy and insurance fraud, along with a slew of other charges.
This incident, along with the accusation of stolen client funds through the law firm, initiated a deep dive into Murdaugh's finances.
One glaring example of how he stole from those who trusted him the most takes us all the way back to 2018, before the boat wreck, before he was shot in the head, before even Maggie and Paul were murdered. Gloria Satterfield was a housekeeper for the Murdaughs at that time, but she was really more than that. It has been said that she did much of the raising of the boys and was very close to the family. In February 2018, she was working at one of the Murdaugh family homes when she fell down the steps and ultimately died from her injuries a few weeks later. The Murdaugh family said she tripped over a dog, but Alex would later state that there were never any dogs involved and that she wasn't actually working, but that he can't remember what she was actually doing there.
He made up the story so that he could go to her sons and tell them to file a wrongful death lawsuit against him. He then claimed to work with them to help them get a settlement from his insurance policy. In reality, he funneled the money, $4.3 million, into an account he owned and kept it for himself. He held the family off with excuses for years. Eventually, the insurance company filed a complaint stating that the information Murdaugh told them regarding the case was incorrect. Murdaugh admitted to the lies in 2023. This was one of the cases that was eventually taken to court.
As we stated in the beginning, Alex Murdaugh was charged with over 100 state financial crimes and 22 federal financial charges. You would think that since he was convicted of double capital murder that these charges wouldn't really matter. It turns out, though, that there are multiple strong opportunities for appeal with the capital murder verdict. This means that it became imperative to prosecutors that his sentence for the financial crimes keep him in prison for life, whether or not the murder charges were overturned.
There were so many valid charges that a trial seemed to be a mess. Ultimately, he was sentenced to 40 federal years for 22 federal charges, including conspiracy to commit wire fraud and bank fraud, wire fraud affecting a financial institution, and money laundering. He was also sentenced to 27 state years on almost 24 charges, including money laundering, breach of trust, conspiracy, forgery, and tax evasion. These verdicts finally ensured that Alex Murdaugh would spend, at the very least, the rest of his productive life in prison.
He scammed his childhood best friend, his clients, his colleagues, and even his own brother. He took millions of dollars from people who trusted him by winning huge claims and keeping most of the money. He had co-conspirators from time to time, but he was the mastermind. He was the one desperate for money, possibly for that $50,000 a week opioid addiction. He was the one who betrayed everyone. It is amazing what money and or drugs will make a man do. In the end, he lost his friends, his career, his family legacy, his family, his dignity, and his freedom.
Remember, the pursuit of happiness and the pursuit of money are two very different things.
The richest person is not the one with the most money. It's the one with true friends.
If you like this video, go ahead and hit the follow button for more financial crime story time.